There we go. We've introduced ourselves. Jenny and Beth are not with us this evening, but they are members of the team at Church House in Leeds. So if you need anything and you call the team, you might speak to Janet or Anne or Jenny or Beth, all here to help. And the email address is there that you can see. And this is kind of what we'll go through tonight. We might not spend too long on the first one because I think there's a bit of experience in the room, but we will go through it just to make sure everybody understands. Then we'll talk about responsibilities, timing, the things a budget should cover, and the principles for a successful budget. And then we do have a budget template that we can share with you, and that might be helpful as you go forward. Then there'll be some time at the end for questions and answers, and do feel free to ask whatever you'd like to ask at that point. So let's begin by handing over what we're going to do tonight to God. Let's pray. Father, you entrust to us all the things of your kingdom, and one of those things are the assets at our disposal, the things you give us to enable your mission in the world. We pray today that we may learn more about your will for our lives and your will for our resources. We may learn more about the skills you wish us to embody as we exercise good stewardship of those resources, and that you would guide us by your wisdom to see what it is that you want us to do with those resources to support the work of your kingdom. So hear us as we pray for all those churches, congregations, and communities that we represent, and all those around us, that together we may be the church that you call us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So on with it. As I say, you may well know all of this, but just in case, budgeting is something that lots of organizations do. A church budget is no different to any other organization or any other person's budget. It's an attempt to look forward and to estimate for the year ahead or the years ahead what income and expenditure are expected to be or likely to be, so that we can make some predictions and forecasts about where we're going to be in terms of our money. And the reason why we budget is so that we can have that reasonable picture of how we expect the finances to turn out, because the finances feed the mission of the church and they feed the work that we do. So in order to determine what we can do in terms of mission and ministry, we need some idea of the resources we have available, and our finances are a major part of that. And for any activity really, but certainly for any major activity, it's really important to plan and consider where the funding and the resource for it will come. As Jesus said when he was teaching in Jerusalem, nobody would set out to build a tower without checking whether they had the resources in order to complete it. Otherwise, they'd be ashamed when they couldn't complete it. So budgeting helps us just to look forward, to predict. It is always a bit of a weather forecast. In other words, new information coming along will affect the budget and make our predictions different. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But it's our best estimate looking forward. And particularly in regards to the work that the Parish Share Working Group's been doing, we're trying to encourage churches to budget ahead, because we're now trying to agree with parishes over the course of the next few years, 3-year rolling expectations about parish share. And our budgets are really helpful in informing those discussions about what's possible, what's not possible, and why we think what we think. So budgeting is a really good tool to help us look forward and discuss and deliberate about what we have and what we will have. Budgeting is something we should all do, and we all do it. From the very minimal thing of, somebody saying, well, if I'm going shopping, I need to make sure I've got X amount in my bank account to pay for the shopping because I roughly know how much it's going to cost. That's an example of budgeting. We all budget for our household expenditure and work out whether our income is going to be enough to meet our outgoings, or if not, how we're going to deal with that, or we might be saving up for something. So we all budget all the time, whether it's for our regular housekeeping, whether it's for purchases like shopping, whether it's for saving for a special thing like a holiday. We're all doing this all the time, and it's not some kind of mystic science that only accountants know about. It's something we all do. And I put on the slide there that the best budgeter I ever met was my mother-in-law, because my mother-in-law kind of worked out exactly what she thought she was going to buy and what she thought she was going to spend, and she kind of worked out what she could do with the money she had coming in, and she tried to make sure that she could always live within her means, and that was classic budgeting. And she would go and review what had happened at the end of every month and just see where things had panned out in relation to the way she thought they would pan out, and that would help her budgeting going forward. And as I said before, this is nothing new. It's been going on really since the beginning of time, ever since somebody collected firewood and worked out if they had enough to last the night. That's a form of budgeting with resource, but budgeting with finance has been going on as well. And as I said, Jesus talks about that in Luke's gospel. And I think the key thing, and this is really important for us as we think about budgeting, is that as we think about discussing budgeting with our PCCs and with other members of the church, that sense that we all do it is really important, because there is really nothing different in principle between the kind of budgeting we all do all of the time and the kind of budgeting even some of my multinational clients that I used to look after were doing. So Shell Oil and people like that budget in just the same way. It's just their budgets are bigger and a bit more detailed and have more variables in them. But the principles of budgeting are very much the same. So when people think about budgeting for their church, for their parish, it shouldn't be scary, because it's something they're doing all the time. And I think that can be really helpful for us to share with PCCs and with congregations, that this isn't some kind of rocket science that we're trying to get them to understand. The process is very simple. So going through, again, lots of us will know this, really the best guide to what next year's budget will be is to have a look at what's happened previously. So if you look at the past year and the past couple of years' accounts, you can usually see some trends in terms of figures that we can know with some certainty. We have a fairly good idea of what our general costs of running the church are in terms of altar supplies or expenses. We can have a reasonable guess at what things like insurance and utilities will be, and we can build in the inflation that we expect to see in those things. We can build in anything that we know is going to change. We've got a new project coming along. We'll have to make sure we've got finance for that. We've got some new members of the ministry team who are going to start claiming more expenses than we've been used to in the past. Or, we've stopped doing something. We can adjust the previous year's figures for all of those things that we do know. But the idea is that we simply look at what's been going on and what we expect to happen, and we adjust the figures that we've been used to cope with that. And again, I think that's really helpful as we talk to our PCCs to say, again, this is exactly what you do at home. It's exactly what you expect if you're thinking about how much it's going to cost you to run your car in the next year. You know that certain things are going to change. The numbers of journeys you make might be different. You'll work out how much that's going to mean in terms of petrol, insurance, and all the rest of it. You do it quite naturally. The key thing, though, is to make a budget. And this is one of the things that some churches don't do that we really would encourage them to do, because it's good stewardship and it's good planning. Making a budget that gives us our best weather forecast, at sort of usually at the end of a year, looking at the coming year, best weather forecast of how we think things will pan out in that coming year, and maybe for a few years ahead, and then to monitor things. So when the weatherman says there's a storm coming across the Atlantic on Monday, and it'll probably hit us on Saturday, they don't leave it at that. They look at how it's going every day, and they update the weather forecast as we get closer to the actual thing happening. And we do exactly the same thing with budgeting. We keep monitoring, we keep looking, and we can keep adjusting our prediction as we go along. So the budget we make now for 2027 will probably be adjusted when we get to the end of 2026 because we'll know more. So it is that kind of rolling program as we go through the years. And as we get new information, we update the budgets for future periods. I think that's really helpful to explain to PCCs, and it's really good for treasurers, chairs of finance to have that way of explaining to people that this is really important stuff, it's really helpful stuff, but it's not mysterious and weird. It's quite normal. There are some things that get technical. Categories of funds can get a bit technical. Restricted and designated funds is always one that confuses some people. So we've put something on this slide just to give an aide-memoire for that. A restricted fund being something that's been given for a particular purpose and can only be used for that purpose. So I'll give you an example. My training incumbent, when he was a curate, so we're going back 40 or 50 years now, he was in a church where they had a tiny little church garden, and somebody left money in their will for the upkeep of the church garden. And it was a percentage of the residue of their estate. And by the time they died, they'd done really quite well out of life. And the amount that was left for the upkeep of the church garden was around about £250,000. And the church garden was about 5 yards by 10 yards, and it was mostly grass. And there was no way in the world that it was going to cost that kind of money to maintain this church garden. However, they needed lots of work on the building and lots of work on their organ that they would love to have funded from that money, but it was left for the upkeep of the church garden, so they couldn't touch it for any other purpose. Eventually, they went to the Charity Commission and got some adjustments to it, but it was left for that purpose. It could only be used for that purpose. The other kind of fund, a designated fund, is one where the PCC has been given some money and the PCC sets it aside. So the PCC has been given some money, it decides to set aside £10,000 for the maintenance of the garden, but if it needs it for another purpose, it can undesignate the fund and use it for something different, as long as it was just given for general use. So a designated fund is a bit like my grandmother's old jam jars on the mantelpiece, one for the gas bill, one for the rent, one for the electricity. And it was perfectly okay. She just put that money in those jars herself. Perfectly okay for her to rob one jar to pay the other when she needed to, and keep doing that. It was just her way of saving. But if somebody had given her the money and said, you can only use that to pay your rent, it would have been wrong for her to use it for anything else. So getting that across to PCCs is often quite useful as well, because often PCCs think once they have designated money for a purpose, they then can't use it for something else. And it can be quite freeing to find that they can. So a lot of that, you guys, I'm sure, will just know, but it's really helpful to have those sorts of ways of explaining it to those who don't know. And I would encourage us all to do that. I'm going to hand over to, I think, Janet, to go through the next little bit.
Thank you, Bill. So yes, I just wanted to talk a little bit about responsibilities for budget. The responsibility for the budgeting in the PCC is actually the whole PCC's responsibility. It's the PCC members' legal responsibility to look after the budget, to look after the finances, to manage the finances, and to control the finances. Obviously, PCCs will appoint a treasurer, and the treasurer's role is to do the practical side of things, to prepare the financial statements, to look at the budget, prepare the draft budget, but then they would bring that along to the PCC themselves to get the final decisions on how to spend the money, how to plan what you're going to spend, to make the financial decisions. So the financial decisions really, at the end of the day, lie with the whole of the PCC. There is a book there, the PCC Accountability Book. We call it the Green Book. If you haven't seen that already, I'm sure most of you probably have seen this, but there is a link there on the slide that will take you to an online version of the book. So you can look at it there. We do have some spare copies as well in the diocesan office. So if you did want a hard copy of the book, just let us know and we can send you a copy. But that's really the Bible, if you like, to have a look and see what your responsibilities are as a PCC around finances with regards to what the Charity Commission thinks. And just leading on from that, looking again at responsibilities, just a little bit about governance. The incumbent, I'm sure you know, is the chair of the PCC. And so we would expect the incumbent to be at every PCC meeting as the chair. And I was saying that the PCC members do have that legal responsibility for the budgeting and for the finances. And that's because they're all trustees of the charity. So it's part of the Charity Act that you, as trustees, have responsibility for the finances. And because of that, you know, we expect that PCC members will exercise wisdom and over the stewardship of their finances, making sure that the money is spent wisely. And that includes the budgeting side as well, making the financial decisions. And also the treasurer, as I said earlier, normally they would do the practical side of things, maintaining the accountancy records, coming back to the PCC meetings on a regular basis and reporting on the budget and how things are going. As Bill was saying, monitoring the budget is really important. And so you want to flag up any financial challenges or issues that you find, or if you've received some additional income, which is a good news as well. You might have received a legacy. And so all of that information should be looked at regularly. You should be reviewing the budget regularly and reporting back, not only to the PCC meeting, but also having a good relationship, the treasurer with the incumbent, so that the treasurer keeps the incumbent well averse of what's happening with the budget. And so as a result of all of that, it's really, I think, wise to say that the responsibility for the budget is a collective one for the PCC members. I know from talking to lots of PCC members, going to the meetings, that quite often everything is left to the treasurer. And a lot of the financial decisions as well are left to the treasurer. And so I would try to encourage that not to happen, that the treasurer shouldn't be feeling that he's got all that responsibility, or he or she's got all that responsibility on their shoulders, that they can come back to the PCC members and ask for a collective responsibility and collective decision making on that. So just a couple of links there as well, where you can go and have a look at the governance rules on the Church of England website, church representation rules, church council measures, and they give you a bit more detail on what the responsibilities of the different roles are within the PCC as well. So we all need to budget, as Bill says, and we all do it. And I thought I'd just give you a couple of slides now, just showing a little bit about what's in a parish budget, and also compare that with our diocesan budget to give you a little bit of an idea of what's in the budget and how important it is. So first of all, if we look at the parish budgets, this is a typical sort of thing that you'd see in a parish budget. You'd be looking at expected income and expenditure, things that you can predict. You could look back a couple of years before, see what you've spent, see what kind of income has come in, and it might be that you've spent the same amount or a little bit extra on insurance every year. It might be that you've spent on utility bills. So you can kind of predict that because you can see what you've spent the year before. You can add on a little bit for inflation, and you can kind of predict what you're going to spend the following year, usually, unless energy bills go sky high. And that's a little bit more unexpected. But then also in terms of income that's coming in on a regular basis, you kind of know what your parish share income is going to be like. If you're planning a stewardship campaign, you might add on extra for what you expect the campaign to increase the parish share contributions that are coming in. So that's all kind of expected as well, and you can plan for that in your budget. And there might be also a certain amount that you put aside for maintenance. You might know that you're going to be spending money on clearing the gutters every year, and how much that's likely to cost. Or other bits of maintenance like garden maintenance or around the building. That's all expected. And of course, there's unexpected expenditure as well. And I've put inflation in here. Normally you can predict inflation, but sometimes it can be a little bit more than you expect. And as Bill was saying, you have to monitor your budget as you go along. And if things change, then you can amend your budget going forward. So that's why monitoring and reviewing is really important. That if something changes, you can reflect that in your budget. Even though you might not have been able to predict it to begin with, you can do some amends as you go along. And doing all of that, planning your budget and doing regular reviewing does help you it gives you a bit more confidence to actually deal with any problems that do come up. If you know what the problems might be, if you're reviewing and you spot them early, you might be able to do something about it at an early stage rather than leaving it until the last minute. And if we now look at the diocesan budget and the process that we go through there, it's not really any different. We're a big organisation, and as Bill says, every organisation plans their budget in the same way. It's the same kind of process. And we do that in order to understand our finances. And it's good practice to do that budgeting, that planning. And if I can show you here just a little bit of more detail about the diocesan budget, we don't just budget for the year ahead, we plan about 5 years ahead, more than that. Our chief financial officer is always looking at budget planning, reviewing. We're doing that on a regular basis. And because we've done that, for next year, for 2026, we've been able to see that we can see what parish share income we think we're going to receive. We can see what other income we're going to receive from selling properties or from money from the national church or from our investments. And we can predict then that we're going to have a shortfall. And we can do that ahead of time. So we're predicting that we're going to have around about a 2.2 million shortfall next year. And that means that because our budget has, we've identified that, we've identified the shortfall, we know that what we're going to receive is unlikely to cover the cost of clergy in our parishes in total. So that's a challenge, a financial challenge that we've been able to predict. And we know that most of that has come from the decline in parish share since 2019. So our parish share income is reducing every year. And that's presenting a financial challenge for the diocese. We are doing different things about it. One of the things that we're trying to do about it is we're looking at investment income. We're looking at selling properties in the diocese, which help to they plug the gap a little bit, the shortfall, but selling properties isn't sustainable in the long run. But we're also looking at the parish share agreement process as well, so that that's another thing that we're kind of looking at how we can do everything holistically to try and decrease that shortfall if we can. But at least we've identified it at an early stage and we can try to do something about it. So you might think, well, when do we budget? When do we start budgeting? And Bill was saying we do that at the end of the year. We plan for the year ahead. So it's a good idea because the PCC will have to approve the budget. It's a good idea to align your budget along with your PCC timelines. And in terms of what kind of PCC meetings you're going to have, you'll look at budgeting annually. And reviewing monthly, as I said. And it's a good idea to start maybe in the autumn to plan your budget for the year ahead. Now, you receive your parish share requests at the end of October, and so that's a good time to start thinking about your budget for the year ahead for the next financial year. And you can also think about forecasting a 3-year budget, because now we're sending out a 3-year parish share request. And that gives our PCCs a bit more confidence planning ahead as well, thinking about what their PCC contributions are going to be for the next 3 years ahead. So that gives them a little bit more confidence to plan ahead too. And then also, as I was saying, fit your budget planning in with your PCC calendar as well, because ultimately you'll need, as a treasurer, you need to prepare the budget, take that along to a PCC meeting. Your draft budget will then need to be presented, and the PCC will need to approve that budget as well. So thinking about planning your budget, when you're going to start the budgeting, and thinking about how it will fit in with your PCC meeting calendar is really important. There's lots of different tools that you can use to help you. We're going to talk about the budget template that we've prepared to help you, and the parish guide budgeting guidelines as well that we've prepared. And I think you will have received this anyway with your parish share request this year. You would have received a copy of this budget template and the parish budgeting guidelines as well. But there are other things out there that you can use, and treasurers do use. Expense Plus has a practical budgeting guide. There's a link there that you can use. The Stewardship charity has a lot of information on financial planning and budgeting. My Fund Accounting is a software program that you can use. I know a lot of treasurers use this as well. So there's a lot of tools out there that you can use. And if you want to explore these further, when you receive the slides, you can click on the links there. And you can also come to myself, or more likely Jennifer Robinson. She's more of an expert in the actual tools and things that are available there. She can help to guide you on these. So what key things should be in a budget? I've mentioned a little bit previously in that previous slide about parish budgets, the kind of things that you would think about for your budget. This infographic here gives you a bit more detail to how to think about what your budget should cover for a year ahead and 3 years ahead. If we start at the bottom of the infographic, the blue section, you think about your income. Your budget will cover and will reflect the income that you expect to receive, and that will be broken down into regular giving. You might be expecting some grants to come in that you've applied for, so that would be in your budget as well. You'd reflect that in your budget. Any fees that you're expecting to come in from life events that you're holding, or anything else, from a rental, that kind of thing, that will be in your budget as well under a separate section. And then any legacies that you've already received, for instance, they might be in a restricted fund, as Archdeacon Bill mentioned earlier. And any legacies that come in, or other donations that come in, you will have a section for that in your budget as well. And then in the middle there, in the green section, you'll also be reflecting your expenditure in your budget. So you'll look at your regular clergy costs. It might be travel costs, travel expenses, staffing costs if you do have anybody else working, like an organist, for instance, or an administrator working within in your church. Obviously, there's utilities, the gas, electricity, water bill, any maintenance that you do, regular maintenance, any contracts that you have for that, that will be reflected there. And also what your parish share contributions are going to be. You will have maybe a standing order set up to contribute your parish share every month. And so that will be reflected in your budget as well. And then what are your mission plans? What have you as a PCC decided that you're going to do? And there will be a cost to that as well. And then at the top there, there's the red section. the kind of essential bills, emergency repairs. You have a little bit of money set aside, maybe as a contingency fund to deal with some emergency repairs that come in. And any future projects that you're planning for, you might be putting something into a designated fund to build up some funds towards a project that you want to deliver. So that's the kind of things that a budget would cover. It's kind of a repeat of what we said already, but I think it helps to consolidate it as we go through. And then how to prepare for budgeting. Just before I hand over to Anne, who's going to go into a bit more detail about the budget template that we've got, I'll just finish by saying, how to prepare for your budgeting. First of all, think about gathering that information that you already have. You already have data, what you've actually spent over the last 2 or 3 years on the church, any income that's come in over the last couple of years, what's in your bank balance, what you've got in your reserves. That will be your restricted reserves and designated funds that you have, and your unrestricted reserves as well, money that you can spend on whatever you need to. And then any existing commitments, such as the salaries, insurance, that sort of thing. And then in the draft budget that you prepare, you will agree those things with the PCC. Any assumptions that you've made. It may be that you're thinking about upping your parish share contributions, or you'd like to up your parish share contributions. That would be something that you would talk about in PCC and agree to that. And then obviously any other things that you're aware of, any changes or increases in your utilities, insurance, inflation's costs, that's all things that you get the data for that and then feed that into your budget as part of the preparation. Checking key dates, when the PCC's meeting, when do you need to get approval for your budget? And then finally, they're planning for any anticipated things, maintenance that you think is going to be coming, that you have a maintenance contract. You might have looked at your QI report, hopefully, and seen what kind of urgent repairs are needed in the next 12 months or in the next 24 months, and you can build that into your budget as well as you prepare it. And then any events, as I said, or projects that you're planning to deliver, you might be in the early stages of that, but you might have a ballpark figure for how much that's going to cost as well. So all of that information is, you need to gather all that together so that you can then use that to inform your budget for the next year, or hopefully for the next 2 or 3 years ahead. Okay, so I'm going to move over to ask Anne now if she will deliver the next section.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Janet. So this next bit is about the steps in setting a budget. So it doesn't matter which budget tool you use to create a budget here, these steps will remain broadly the same. So the first thing that we'd always encourage you to do is to look at your actual figures of what was spent for the previous couple of years. So there you'd need to look at any income or expenditure trends and identify any one-off and ongoing commitments. You'll see in our budget template later, we've chosen to use the last 2 years. If you're looking for trends, you may want to use the last 3 years of budgeting information just to help you to identify any trends there. We'd also ask that you forecast income realistically. So base any of your estimates on actual patterns and on local knowledge. You can include grants and fundraising here, but only if they are confirmed or extremely likely to come through. And you may want to consider here seasonal variations. A lot of churches have a large influx in income over Christmas and Easter periods, and obviously have more down times at other times of the year. Our next step would be to plan your expenditure based on priorities. So start with your fixed costs, so things that have to be paid even if your income is low. So that might be your gas, electricity, insurance costs for the church. Next, you'd want to add in any mission and ministry priorities agreed by the PCC. So again, this is a case of, as treasurer, you will be writing the budget, but it's really up to the collective PCC to say what should be going in there and what the numbers should be in terms of things like mission and ministry. You'll also need to include any maintenance and compliance costs in your expenditure here. Then you'd look at including reserves and contingencies. So where possible, always allow something for inflation and for rising energy costs. So those of you who have seen your parish share requests already will have noticed that in requesting a 3-year share request from you, we've included a 3% annual uplift, which is to account for inflation. As Janet said, inflation can be a bit tricky at times and can vary further than we would expect. So do keep monitoring those budgets once you have allowed for inflation. You'll also need to set aside funds for any unexpected repairs or emergencies and plan for any future projects that you know you've got coming up, such as building projects or if you've got a quinquennial inspection coming up in the next few years. Once you've written that budget, you'll need to get PCC approval for it. So do review the budget with the PCC and amend where needed. In theory, the PCC should be able to read and understand your budget. Now, I know that as treasurers, one of the difficulties is sometimes explaining finances to other members of the PCC, but it is really important that we do communicate what's in that budget and that you get PCC approval and it's recorded in the minutes there. Lastly, we're going to suggest that you communicate and monitor your budget. So as we've said, share that budget with the PCC and monitor throughout the year what your actual figures are versus what you thought, what you were budgeting for future income and expenditure, because then you can adjust your budget if any major changes occur. So a little bit about budgeting principles for success here. So we've already mentioned about forecasting income realistically, and basing those estimates on actual patterns and not hopes, and being cautious with unpredictable income there. As I've said, review this throughout the year. It's really important to continue to monitor your budget and do investigate any variances promptly. In some cases, you might notice, for example, your water bill suddenly has increased. Well, that could point to a water leak, for example. So it is really important that these figures are looked at throughout the year. The other thing we can do is to align budget with priorities. So Jesus says that we put our treasure where our heart is. So we're going to be looking at spending our money where it supports ministry and mission. And we want to make sure that we are saving money in reserves to preserve those reserves in line with policy as well. We need to plan for rising costs, as I said, factor in inflation, utilities and insurance increases, always certain that they're going to increase each year. So do factor something in and adjust it when you've got the actual figures. And then you can include any irregular or semi-regular costs, such as quinquennial repairs, which come every 5 years or so, and any major maintenance. Okay, so our next section is slightly different. So we have, I'm saying we, Jenny Robinson, who is fantastic, by the way, has created a parish budgeting guide for us. So this will be sent to you within the next few days off the back of this training session. And we've created this workbook to walk you through each step of the budgeting process from preparation right through to monitoring and review. Now, for some of you who are accountants, you might not find that as helpful as some of you who haven't got a financial background, but I would encourage you to read through it, as there's always something more that we can learn. So the budgeting guide is designed to be used before completing the PCC budget template, which is our own in-house budgeting template. But it will also work just as well if you're using other tools for budgeting. So the guide itself explains how to use the template. It also has in there a budget preparation checklist, and it will talk you through a bit about building and reviewing that budget, monitoring and responding to changes, as well as a little bit about communicating and using that budget effectively. Hopefully the layout will be quite familiar to you, and that will help when it comes onto our budget planning tool. Okay, so again, this budget template, as Janet said, was sent out to everyone with the parish share requests just a few weeks ago. So this might not be brand new to you now, but we're just going to take a quick look through it, and I'll just guide you through how we intend it to be used. So the template is designed to support financial decision planning, to help track that income expenditure reserves. And we've added in a page for any variances to track variances throughout the year. And it can provide a structured format for multi-year budgeting. So it's very helpful for that. So across the bottom of this slide here, under number 4, it says review sheets. So those are the sheets that you will see across the bottom of the workbook when you open the Excel document. The guide on the first page will tell you exactly how to use it. And then we'll go through on the next few slides and let you know what each of those tabs mean for the budget template. So this is just a screenshot of the guide sheet. So it's going to tell you everything about how to use it. It really is a start your workbook from left to right and just work your way through it. So the next tab that you will use on the worksheet is to start with your past data. So in this sheet, you can complete the 2023 and 2024 actual figures using the data from the return of parish finance. So our template has been based on all the categories used in the return of parish finance. Hopefully, this means that they will be familiar categories to you. But it also means that you can pull through your previous data from 2023 and 2024 and just input that straight into your budget, which gives you a bit of a quick start guide to doing this. And if any of you are interested, we can send you a personalised budget using your past data from 23 and 24 for your church, and we can get that sent through after our meeting. So our next step is to go into the PCC budget itself and estimate the 2025 actuals. Now, as this is towards the end of 2025, you may decide, let's not bother with 2025, let's just start planning for 2026. Either way, you can add in the information into this sheet. So you can see there are several columns there. They're color coded. So the red columns are for previous years. The blue column is for the current year, and the green columns are for the next 3 years. Now, this is a template. You can change this any way you see fit that works for your church. So if you would like to start from 2026 and budget for 27, 28, 29, that's wonderful. You can go into this template and you can change them. Similarly, if you see any of these categories and you think, well, that one doesn't really work for our church, or I'd prefer to rename this category as something else that works for us, feel free to make those changes and edits. The only thing that I would say about doing that is that then you wouldn't be able to pull through the information from the return of parish finance for 23 and 24. But again, it's a template and it's to help you, not to shoehorn you into doing what we think is a good way of doing your finances. So the next bit is about planning ahead. So you can add your figures for the next 3 years into these green columns here. And the magic of this spreadsheet is that once you've inputted these figures into the green columns, they will automatically be pulled through onto the following review sheets in the Excel document, which is really handy, and you don't have to repeat yourself, which is wonderful. The next sheet that we've added in, Jenny added in response to a request from several of our treasurers in one of our previous budget trainings, because one of our treasurers very astutely said, can we do this monthly? Can we, instead of just looking at the annual figures, is there a way to track it every month? And Jenny, because she's a whiz at Excel, said, yes, that's something that we can do for you. And so she's added this page. Now, this page, you can literally go through each month of the year and you can add in what was actually spent. It will then look against what you forecast, what you budgeted, and it will show any variances there. Now, again, as we've said before, looking at your variances and why that might be is really helpful. And so we've added in a comment section there as well. So if you know, for instance, that your boiler broke and it was using a lot of gas, then that might be something that you'd like to put in the comments there to explain why one month you had a ridiculously high figure in gas or similar there. So that was us very, very quickly taking you through the budget template that we've created. Further support is available should you wish it. So again, I'll just go back to mentioning that parish budgeting guide that's been put together for you. That will be sent out within the next few days following this session. But you can also access some one-to-one support from the diocese. So if you start creating your budget for your church and you think, I really need some help with this, I don't quite know where I'm going with it, you can arrange a meeting with Jenny Robinson via a link that we've put on the slide there. And that will book in, I think it's a 30-minute time slot for her to be able to chat with you and go through the budget that you've created and troubleshoot any issues you might be having. We've also put some links there on this slide as well for other useful resources for budgeting. So there's links to different web pages there, different practical budgeting guides. What you'll see is everybody has their own way of doing things. And we don't want to say that what you're doing is wrong. There are simply different ways to do it. So we are presenting you with a further option. But if any of those further support is helpful, do feel free to use those options there.